2020 was supposed to be an amazing year for roller coasters, but that was before COVID-19 reared its ugly head. Several parks have announced they're delaying their 2020 editions until 2021, and others are rumored to be doing the same. But Kings Island took the ambitious step to open Orion despite being forced to operate their newest attraction at a reduced capacity. It's no secret most park goers will want to ride Orion. On opening day, Orion reportedly pulled a 4-hour line stretching all the way back to Diamondback. It's also no secret that a 4-hour line is bad for both guests and the park. Guests are miserable waiting in a queue line that long, especially when it offers as little shade as Orion's queue line. Guests end up wasting most of their day queuing for one ride. Meanwhile, the park has to manage that monster of a queue line and loses revenue from guests who are no longer able to play games or purchase food. As a result, Kings Island took the prudent step to convert Orion to a boarding pass system. In this video, I'll cover how the boarding pass process works. Disney recently used a boarding pass system for their incredible Rise of the Resistance attraction, and Universal started doing the same for Hagrid's Magical Creatures motorbike adventure post-lockdown. Both these attractions have a virtual boarding pass system. Guests must book their time slot using their smartphones on the park's official app. This process creates quite a bit of anxiety because a technological error can thwart your ability to ride the attraction all day. Orion has a physical boarding ticket system. As of my visit on the 4th of July, guests can obtain a boarding pass in the entrance area to the new Area 72 section that Orion belongs to. Guests receive a return time with a 1-hour block to return. Upon arriving, you hand over your ticket and you'll have to wait roughly a half hour from what I saw. But that could change depending upon how many guests redeem their ticket at once and the ride's uptime. But I doubt the latter will be too much of an issue because the B&M Gigas and their hypercoasters are some of the most reliable rides out there. I noticed boarding passes were available until roughly the mid-afternoon. Kings Island is doing a time-based reservation system to enter the park, and the boarding passes seem to remain available past the latest admission time. What that means is pretty much anyone wanting to ride Orion should be able to on a given day. That being said, if you want to ride Orion, definitely head there first to get your boarding pass just in case that changes. Each guest is only supposed to get one boarding pass per day. I thought the park may use your park ticket to keep track of this, but they simply hand out a card. I'm not sure how likely it would be for an employee to recognize someone going back for a second boarding pass, especially because there are shift changes. So really, it's on the honor system. And I know there are multiple people who got multiple boarding passes. I don't know what happens if the park catches you doing that, but please respect the park's policy. This will allow more people to experience Kings Island's newest coaster. I very well could have gotten a second boarding pass. After getting my initial boarding pass, I returned to ask the employee distributing them what the latest return time was. She tried to hand me one, but I respectfully declined. It sure was tempting though. I was just interested to know when the last boarding pass ended, because that might tip off if the queue line was going to reopen as standby. And I did learn that the last boarding group finished an hour before park closing on the day I visited, and the park's plan was to reopen the queue line to everyone during the last hour for re-rides. Now, there are some caveats that I want to mention. One, the final boarding pass time could change day to day. On the day I visited Kings Island, they had nighttime fireworks, and because Orion cannot run during the fireworks, they may have cut off the boarding groups a little sooner than usual. 2, the queue line reopening is subject to capacity. It seems like the park does not want Orion running past closing, in 2020 at least. So if Orion has a lot of downtime or struggles to clear out its queue line, the queue may not reopen to standby guests. When I waited for the queue to reopen, the supervisor on duty kept cautioning that it wasn't guaranteed to reopen. 3, the queue line may not open for very long. On the day I visited, the queue line reopened immediately after the final boarding passes window finished, and it only remained open for maybe 10 to 20 minutes. So if you want to get a re-ride on Orion, definitely figure out when the final boarding pass ends and linger around the main entrance. Not only does this maximize your chance of getting at least one additional re-ride, but you could get lucky enough to get multiple re-rides. When the queue reopened at 9, there was hardly anyone in line, so I was able to board almost immediately and get back in line for a third ride before the queue was closed for the night. Last but not least, I want to touch on Fastlane. Kings Island is no longer selling fast lanes for 2020, but the park will still honor the Fastlane Plus that anyone pre-purchased before the shutdown. Fastlane users do not need a boarding pass, and there is no restriction in the number of times they can ride Orion. So I'm definitely envious of those lucky enough to have Fastlane at Kings Island in 2020. While it may be a bit frustrating to only have one guaranteed ride on Orion per visit in the near future at least, the alternative is spending a large chunk of your day in one miserable line. Realistically, you could probably only get on Orion at most 2 or 3 times per day if the ride continues to pull crowds like it did on opening day. The boarding pass system gives guests a reasonable wait for the new attraction while still allowing them to have enough time to enjoy the rest of Kings Island. And since B&Ms are super reliable, I think there's a good chance the queue line will continue to reopen at the end of the day. So what are your thoughts on Orion's boarding pass system, or any boarding pass system in general? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you for listening, and subscribe for more roller coaster content here at Canopy Coaster.